I don't expect this to go viral or change anyone's life, but I've got this weird ache in my chest that won't go away unless I write it out. My name's Corbin, and if that already sounds like a guy who doesn't speak up much, you'd be right. The funny thing is, it all started with a clock. A stupid, oversized brass wall clock that chimes every hour like it thinks it's in a mansion. Even though we live in a cramped two-bedroom apartment with uneven floors and a leaky dishwasher, I always hated that clock. My wife, Ray, loved it, said it made the place feel alive. That night, the clock chimed 7, and she didn't look up from her phone. It was our anniversary. 12 years. I had set the table, reheated the lasagna I'd made the night before, and even pulled out the dusty candle holders from that wedding we went to in Tampa. I put on the playlist we used to dance to in the living room when the power went out during storms. She never looked up. Cleared my throat. "Hey," I said weakly, "do you want to eat?" Still scrolling, still smiling, but not at me. Then she spoke finally. "Why are you always waiting for me to start everything?" she asked flatly, like she was annoyed that I needed her attention on our anniversary. I mumbled something like, "I thought maybe we'd eat together." She sighed, that kind of sigh where someone has already decided you're a disappointment before you even speak. She put the phone down just long enough to stand up and say, "You either do what I say from now on, or you can pack your bags." "I'm not asking again, Corbin." I thought she was joking. I even let out this pitiful little laugh, hoping she'd crack a smile or say, "Gotcha." She didn't. She walked into the bathroom, closed the door, and locked it. And that was that. I stood in the middle of our kitchen, candles still flickering, lasagna getting cold, realizing I'd spent 12 years becoming invisible in my own home. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was angry, I'm not even sure I have the energy for anger anymore, but because the question kept looping in my mind. What did I become to her? And when, exactly, did I stop mattering? But here's the twist. That moment wasn't the real betrayal. That came later, much later, and it unraveled not in some big, dramatic confrontation, but in quiet moments, overheard whispers, and one haunting phrase that still replays in my mind every time the clock chimes. You'd be surprised what people say when they forget you're listening. And I listened to every word. The next morning, Ray acted like nothing had happened. She asked if I had seen her scarf, casually complained about how much laundry we had, then reminded me that her work dinner was still on for Thursday. "So don't make any plans," she said, already half out the door. Not a word about what she'd said the night before. No apology, no explanation, just a perfectly practiced smile and a cup of coffee she didn't bother to finish. I didn't ask about it. I didn't want to hear it again. I know how that sounds weak, but I've always been the kind of person who avoids conflict, especially with Ray. When she gets sharp, it cuts deep. And somehow, no matter what happens, I'm always the one apologizing, even when I don't know what for. But something had shifted in me. Not enough to speak up yet. I wasn't that brave, but enough to start paying attention. That night, I couldn't sleep again. Around midnight, I got up to grab some water and realized Ray's phone was still on the kitchen counter, screen glowing faintly. She was in the shower, or at least the water was running. I wasn't trying to snoop. I swear I wasn't. But when the screen lit up with a name I didn't recognize, Link Sunglasses, and a message that said, "Same time Thursday. I'll book the room again," I froze. My first reaction wasn't rage. It was confusion. The kind of confusion that makes you feel small, like a child watching adults speak a language they were never taught. A part of me still hoped it was nothing. A misunderstanding, maybe a work thing, maybe someone else's phone. I just stood there, letting the message sink in. I didn't open it. I didn't scroll. I just backed away like the phone might explode. The next day, I left work early, something I never do, and drove to the address I had memorized from Ray's work events. The hotel, the one she always said her firm used for client hosting. I sat in the parking lot for 2 hours. My heart pounded with every person who walked through the glass doors. No sign of her, not that day at least. But that Thursday I returned. I parked farther away, behind the side fence, and waited with a coffee I couldn't bring myself to drink. At 6:47 p.m., Ray pulled in. She was wearing the same beige coat she always claimed made her look too much like an attorney. She wasn't alone. A man stepped out from the passenger side. Tall, probably early 40s, sharp suit, the kind of guy who looks like he gets the last word in every meeting. They walked in together, not touching, not talking, just moving like two people who'd done this before and didn't need to speak. Still, I told myself I didn't know anything for sure. Not yet. I had no proof, no hard evidence. But it came. Not how I expected, and not from Ray. It came from a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. 2 days later, I got a call from Ray asking if I could drop off her lunch at her office because she'd left it in the fridge. I went, as always. I parked, went up to the floor I knew like the back of my hand, and walked toward her corner desk. She wasn't there. Her colleague, Alda, a soft-spoken woman who always greeted me too kindly, almost awkwardly, was speaking to someone just around the divider wall. She didn't hear me come in. I heard her say clearly, "He still doesn't know, huh? You're honestly getting away with it." Pause. Then another voice, my wife's voice. "Corbin? Please." He wouldn't notice if I painted the ceiling red. That man would thank me for the brush. They both laughed, and it echoed in my head like that stupid brass clock. I didn't confront her. I didn't say a word. I placed the lunch on her desk, turned around, and left without making a sound because, for the first time in years, I was listening, not to her words, but to the silence that had been growing between us. And it was deafening. I used to believe that when something broke in a marriage, you'd feel it instantly, like a snap, a crash, a collapse. But now I know the truth. It's more like a slow, silent splintering, hairline cracks that form behind the wallpaper of your daily life. And by the time you see the damage, it's already too late to repair. After hearing Ray's words to Alda, I didn't eat for a full day. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the image of her smiling while she mocked me behind my back. And the worst part? I didn't even feel surprised. Just foolish. But as usual, I said nothing. When Ray came home that night, I greeted her with a soft, "Hey, how was your day?" She responded like always, "Busy." Then she kissed my cheek like she hadn't just reduced me to a punchline at her office. It was almost admirable how convincing she could be. Almost. The next morning, I sat across from her at the table and really watched her for the first time in weeks. Her movements were automatic. Pouring coffee, checking her phone, glancing toward the mirror behind me like she was more interested in her reflection than anything I had to say. I wondered if she even saw me anymore, or if she only saw what she wanted me to be, quiet, agreeable, and oblivious. But she made a mistake that day. It was small, so small that I don't think she even noticed. A tiny twitch of panic in her face when I said, "I've been thinking about taking a week off work." She paused, spoon midair. "Oh? Why?" she asked, voice steady but eyes sharp. I shrugged. "Just want to spend some time with you. Maybe go away for a bit. Just us." It was a test. A weak one, sure, but a test all the same. And she failed. She looked away, muttered something about an upcoming internal strategy summit at the office, and suddenly became very interested in her calendar. I didn't push. I just smiled and said, "Maybe next month." That afternoon, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went to an electronics store and bought a small audio recorder. I know how that sounds. I'm not proud of it. I felt like some kind of cliché, the clueless husband turned amateur detective. But I wasn't looking to catch her in something scandalous. I just wanted the truth, the real, unfiltered truth, the version of Ray she gave everyone but me. I left it in her car, tucked behind the lining under the passenger seat. She always used that car for her work events, and I waited. 2 days later, when she was out late with clients, I retrieved it. My hands were shaking when I hit play. Most of it was boring. Static, road noise, an old Taylor Swift song playing too low to recognize. But 32 minutes in, I heard her voice, and not just hers. She was laughing, not politely, not her smile for the boardroom laugh, but a soft, private kind of laugh I hadn't heard in years. Then a man's voice, confident, familiar somehow. I couldn't make out the full conversation, but I heard enough to feel the floor tilt beneath me. "You really think he has no clue?" A pause. Then Ray. Corbin? He still buys me flowers when I'm mad at him. He thinks I'm just stressed. It's almost cute. That was the word that broke me. Cute. That's what I was to her. A soft place to land. A background character in her high-drama life. Not a partner, not a person. Just someone to be manipulated with just enough affection to keep him quiet. I sat there in the dark, listening to another man tell my wife she was beautiful. Listening to her say she wished they had more time alone. And the worst part? I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even move. I just sat there, letting every word hollow me out. Because deep down I already knew. I'd known for months, maybe years. But it's one thing to suspect. It's another to hear it. To know without a shadow of a doubt that the person you loved has already replaced you in their heart. Still, I didn't confront her because I wasn't ready. Not yet. There was one more piece missing, and I wouldn't find it until the night of our friend Dell's engagement party, when Ray made a public announcement that would leave everyone in the room stunned. Especially me. The invitation arrived a few weeks after I heard the recording. Glossy, formal, the kind of envelope that smells like expensive perfume and fresh ink. Dell and Mari were getting engaged, and the party was set to be held at the rooftop lounge of a boutique hotel downtown. Ray was thrilled. She and Mari went back years, and she'd always loved events where she could dress up and play the part of the polished, elegant wife. That used to be our thing, the two of us, getting ready together, helping each other with zippers, laughing at how nervous I always got at big gatherings. This time, she got ready alone, humming in the bathroom while I sat on the edge of the bed, tying my tie, hands useless. It had been 10 days since I heard her call me cute, since I heard her whisper to another man like she used to whisper to me. 10 days of pretending. 10 days of cooking dinner, doing laundry, giving her space, all while the echo of her betrayal swirled in my head like background static. But the party that night was different. From the moment we arrived, Ray was radiant. She wore this deep emerald green dress that shimmered under the rooftop lights, and I caught several people staring at her, some with admiration, others with envy. She kissed cheeks, accepted compliments, laughed at jokes that weren't funny. I followed behind her like an assistant, not a husband. At one point, I found myself standing near the bar alone, swirling the melting ice in my glass, when Dell came up beside me. "Corbin, man, you good?" he asked. "You've been kind of quiet tonight." I gave him the usual smile. "Yeah, just taking it all in." He clinked his glass against mine. "You've got a hell of a woman. Always admired how steady you two are." I didn't respond, not because I was being rude, but because I honestly didn't know what to say anymore. I wasn't sure who Ray and I were. Not really. And that question kept tapping on the inside of my skull like a leaky faucet. About halfway through the evening, Mari's father gave a toast. Everyone turned toward the bar, glasses raised, the city skyline glowing behind him. He spoke about love, about commitment, about choosing each other every day, even when it's hard. I watched Ray out of the corner of my eye. She looked calm, unmoved. Then it happened. When the speech ended and the music picked up again, Ray walked over to me, wrapped her hand around my arm, and tapped her glass with a fork. The delicate chime cut through the noise, and suddenly the room quieted. Everyone turned to face us. I had no idea what she was doing. "I just want to say something real quick," she said, her voice bright, breezy. "It's so wonderful to celebrate Dell and Mari tonight, but it's also a good time to reflect on our own journeys, too." My heart began to thump. She smiled. "For those of you who don't know," she continued, "Corbin and I have been doing some evaluating lately. Recentering, I guess you'd call it. And I told him just the other day that we're entering a new phase in our marriage." The words hit like a punch to the gut. Not because they were cruel, but because they were crafted, scripted, and everyone was watching. "We've decided," she said, "that from now on, we're going to focus more on individuality, space, exploration, growing into ourselves while still supporting each other." There was this murmur of polite confusion around the room, the kind that says, "Are we clapping for this? Is this a good thing?" And then she added, "So if you see us doing things separately more often, just know it's part of the plan." She raised her glass and sipped. I stood frozen beside her, smiling like a ventriloquist's dummy, nodding like I was in on the joke, even though my insides were shaking. People clapped. Someone whistled. Mari mouthed, "Wow." And all I could think about was the man in the audio recording, the one she made these individual plans with. I didn't ask her about it on the way home. I didn't bring it up at all. But I noticed how she didn't hold my hand in the car, how she stared out the window the whole ride, already 100 miles away in her head. That night, while she slept soundly beside me, I stared at the ceiling and asked myself the question I'd been avoiding for too long. What exactly was she preparing me for? And how long had this been in motion without me even noticing? I didn't know it yet, but I was about to find out, because the next day, an unexpected visit from someone I hadn't seen in years would peel back the last layer, and what he told me would change everything. It was a rainy Sunday morning, the kind where time feels heavier. Ray was still asleep, wrapped in a cocoon of blankets, her face peaceful in a way I hadn't seen in years. I stood in the kitchen, watching the coffee drip into the pot like it might spell out answers I still didn't have. My eyes were sore from another night of restless thoughts, of running over every moment from the party and trying to decode her words like a man desperate for a map in a forest he didn't realize he was lost in. I heard the knock at the door just after 9. 3 knocks, not urgent, not soft. I wasn't expecting anyone. Ray never had visitors this early, and my family rarely dropped by unannounced. I hesitated a moment, then walked over, still in my threadbare gray hoodie and socks. When I opened the door, the man standing there looked about my age, maybe a couple of years older. Dark jacket, jeans, no umbrella. His hair was wet and stuck to his forehead, and for a second I didn't recognize him. Then he spoke. "Corbin?" he asked, like he wasn't totally sure it was me. I nodded slowly. "Owen," he said. "Ray's old friend from college." The name clicked in my brain like a reluctant seatbelt. I remembered Ray mentioning him years ago, once or twice maybe. A few stories about wild dorm parties, long debates over coffee, group projects, but that was it. I never met him in person, and I definitely hadn't expected him to show up on my doorstep like a storm I didn't know was coming. "I need to talk to you," he said. Privately. I don't know why I let him in. Maybe it was the look in his eyes. Not smug, not angry, just tired, like someone carrying something heavy for too long. We sat at the kitchen table, steam rising from my untouched coffee. Ray was still upstairs, thankfully. "I've been going back and forth for weeks," he said, trying to decide if I should even say anything. "But after what she did to Jordan," he stopped himself. His hands tightened into fists on the table, then relaxed. "Look, I'm not here to ruin your life. I think Ray's already been doing that slowly. I'm here because I know she's not going to stop, and you deserve to know the full picture." My heart began to pound, but I didn't interrupt. Couldn't. Owen exhaled sharply, then said the sentence that lit a fire under everything I'd been trying to suppress. "She's not just cheating, Corbin. She's been manipulating you for years, and she's done this before. You're not the first." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, there was a guy before you, Jordan. He was her fiancé. She told you they just didn't work out, right? What she didn't tell you is that she drained his savings account, convinced him to put her name on his condo, and when he finally caught on, she made him look unstable, got his friends to turn on him. She's good at it. Scary good." I sat there, frozen. I didn't want to believe it, but I could, because part of me already did. "She used me too," Owen continued. "Back then, I thought I was the exception. Her emotional support. We never slept together, but she used our friendship like leverage. Whenever she needed an alibi, I was her shield. When Jordan started asking questions, she told him she was crashing on my couch because she didn't feel safe. I didn't even know until he called me, crying, asking if I loved her, too. I wanted to be angry at him, but I wasn't. I saw the guilt all over his face, the kind that sits with a person long after the damage is done. "I thought she changed," he said. "But then I heard through someone that she was married. I looked you up. I saw the anniversary photos. She looked polished, and I told myself, maybe she was different now. Maybe you brought out the best in her." He leaned forward, voice low. But last month, she called me out of nowhere. Asked if I still had the extra key to my place. Said she might need a place to stay soon, that you'd grown clingy and didn't understand her anymore. I felt something inside me give, not break, just give. A quiet surrender, like my brain finally stopped trying to protect my heart from something it already knew was coming. I don't need anything from you, Owen said. I just thought you deserved the truth, because she's not going to stop, and the longer you wait, the worse it gets. He stood up, pulled a small envelope from his coat pocket, and slid it across the table. I printed some stuff, messages, screenshots, dates. Use it or don't. Just be smart. Then he left. I sat there for a long time before touching the envelope. And when I finally opened it, my fingers trembling, I saw her name in message after message. Familiar turns of phrase, nicknames she once used for me, now used for someone else. Dates that lined up exactly with the nights she claimed to be working late. Rooms, flights, payments, a whole secret life. I didn't wake her. I didn't say anything at all. But I knew then I couldn't keep pretending because it wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about who I had become and how much more I was willing to lose to keep holding on to someone who had already let go of me years ago. I didn't sleep the night Owen came. I didn't even pretend to. I just sat at the kitchen table with the envelope in front of me, going over each page until the words started to blur. The timestamps, the hotel confirmations, the pet names that had once belonged to me. They all worked together like some grotesque collage, layering over the version of Ray I thought I knew. Every few hours, I'd hear her shifting upstairs, sighing in her sleep, rolling over, completely unaware of the quiet collapse taking place just a floor below. By sunrise, I still hadn't decided what to do. The truth was too big to fit into any kind of plan. I wasn't built for this, for confrontation, for strategy, for revenge. I wasn't like the men in movies who storm out or toss rings on countertops. I was the guy who stayed quiet, who waited, who hoped too long. But something had changed in me. I felt it. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. The kind that comes not with fire, but with stillness. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to accuse. I just needed to see if she'd lie to my face one more time. I needed to give her the chance. Not for her, for me. So I waited. That evening, I asked Ray if she wanted to watch something together. She raised an eyebrow like the suggestion was strange but agreed. We sat on the couch like strangers forced to play house, the TV flickering in front of us while the distance between our bodies felt like a canyon. Halfway through the episode, I asked casually, "Hey, whatever happened to your old friend Owen?" She didn't flinch, didn't even look at me. "Who?" she asked. "Owen, from college. I remember you mentioned him a while back." "Oh," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "No idea. We haven't spoken in forever." I nodded, said nothing. She went back to her phone, tapping away, and I stared straight ahead at the screen, not watching anything. That was the moment I knew for sure. The lie wasn't even careful. It didn't need to be because, in her mind, I was still the same harmless shadow I'd always been. Too timid, too passive, too nice to ever question anything. She was wrong. The next day, while she was at work, I took down the box from our hallway closet, the one marked wedding stuff. It hadn't been opened in years. Inside were the usual things: dried flowers from her bouquet, the ribbon from our engagement announcement, the candle we never lit. But underneath, taped to the bottom of the box, was a plastic sleeve labeled Vows, Original Drafts. It made me pause. I remembered that we had each written early drafts of our vows before rewriting them for the ceremony. We had joked about keeping the cheesy ones to laugh at someday, but I hadn't seen those since the wedding. I opened the sleeve. Inside were 2 folded pages, one hers, one mine. I read hers again for the first time in over a decade. And that's when I noticed it. At the bottom corner, half scratched out in ink, a name. Jordan. The same name Owen had mentioned. It wasn't just a slip of the pen. It wasn't like she'd recycled a line. It was an entire sentence addressed to him. "You were the first person to make me feel seen, even when I didn't know who I was becoming, Jordan." The ink was darker over his name, like she'd gone over it again and again to try and erase him from that memory. But he was there. She had written her wedding vows to me while still writing about someone else. My stomach turned. I sat on the floor holding that piece of paper like it might set itself on fire if I blinked. I couldn't feel my hands. Couldn't breathe right. It was one thing to lie now, to cheat now, to build some second life while I walked around watering her plants and doing our taxes. But this meant she never really chose me. I was never plan A. I was the backup, the placeholder, the safe bet. The man she married when her chaos finally burned out. And she needed someone to clean up the ashes and build her a future. I thought about our entire relationship in reverse. How she had always kept certain friends separate. How she'd flinched when I brought up shared finances. How she insisted on keeping her own room for focus and meditation. How she said she didn't want kids, not because she wasn't ready, but because you never know what the future holds. And I realized I had always been trying to earn love she never intended to give. I didn't cry. I just sat there in the hallway, holding a version of our history that had never been mine to begin with. And in that moment, I made the quietest decision of my life. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't sabotage. I wouldn't even confront her. I would let her keep the version of the story she'd built, and I would write a new one of my own. Because the man she thought would stay forever, he was already gone. I used to think leaving meant shouting, slamming doors, dramatic ultimatums. I used to think it had to be loud to matter. But now I know the most permanent kinds of leaving are done in silence while the other person isn't even looking. I waited 2 more days. Not because I had doubts, but because I needed to plan. I had spent so much of my life orbiting Ray that I'd forgotten what my own gravity felt like. I didn't have much. No family close by, no separate bank account, no backup plan. I had always assumed we were a unit, that we shared everything. Turns out, she had her escape routes mapped a long time ago. It was time I found mine. On Wednesday morning, Ray left early for a client breakfast. She kissed my cheek, told me not to wait up for dinner, and breezed out the door like she didn't have a lie tucked behind every syllable. I stood in the doorway long after she was gone, the quiet pressing in. Then I started packing. I didn't take everything, just the essentials. A few boxes, my clothes, my laptop, an old notebook she'd never touched, and the one photo of us from our wedding day that still felt real. Before the performance began, before I became a supporting character in a story written without me, I booked a short-term rental under a different name, using an old ID I still had from freelance work. It wasn't glamorous, just a tiny apartment above a closed-down bookstore in the older part of town. But it was mine. And when I turned the key that first night, a weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying finally slid off my chest. She didn't text, didn't call, not that night, not the next, because she hadn't noticed. That part, more than anything, shattered me. Not because I wanted her to beg or cry or even be angry, but because I mattered so little to her reality that my absence didn't register. It was as if I had been erased from the very moment I stopped being useful. On the 3rd night, my phone buzzed. Ray. Hey, are you picking up more coffee pods? We're out. No mention of me not being home. No question about where I was. Just a casual errand like she was talking to a roommate. I didn't reply. The next morning, I sent a single email. No drama. No accusations. Just facts. Ray, I've moved out. I won't be coming back. You don't need to contact me. The lease is in your name now. It always was. Take care, Corbin. Then I shut the phone off and placed it in a drawer. I knew she'd try eventually, not because she missed me, but because people like Ray don't like loose ends. They don't like not having the last word. For once, I'd taken it from her. I spent the next week in silence. No friends, no explanations. I walked every day past unfamiliar shops and alleyways, letting my brain slowly stitch together pieces of myself I hadn't accessed in years. I slept for hours without waking in panic. I cooked sad little meals that didn't need to be Instagram-worthy. I read poetry I hadn't touched since college, and I breathed, truly breathed. It wasn't joy I felt. Not yet, but it was something close to peace. A kind of peace that only comes after you've stopped chasing someone who never once looked back. Then one afternoon, as I was coming back from the corner store with a box of tea and a roll of paper towels, I saw someone waiting on the steps of my building. It was Alda, Ray's coworker. She stood up when she saw me, holding a small envelope, her expression unreadable. "I'm not here to start anything," she said quickly. "I just didn't know where else to bring this." "She doesn't know I came." I nodded cautiously. She handed me the envelope. "She's spiraling a little," she said. "Not because you're gone, but because she didn't get to control how it ended. I thought you should see this." Then she left. Inside the envelope was a printed email, something Ray had sent to her boss 2 days earlier. It was a resignation letter. Except it wasn't quite that. It was manipulative, full of half-truths, painting me as emotionally unstable and controlling, implying that I had cut her off from her independence and that she needed to reclaim her identity. I stared at the page for a long time, not because it hurt, honestly it didn't, but because it confirmed what I'd feared all along. Even in my absence, I was still a prop in her story, still the villain in a narrative designed to free her from responsibility. I didn't respond. I didn't forward it. I didn't defend myself because the truth is, the people who matter, they already see through the act. And as for Ray, she'd built a world so hollow, so entirely made of performance and mirrors, that she no longer knew when the mask was off. I had nothing left to give her, and for the first time in years I was okay with that. A month passed, then 2, and something remarkable happened in the stillness. Life kept going. The world, which had once revolved entirely around Ray's moods, her plans, her distractions, kept spinning just fine without her in it. I didn't fall apart. I didn't crumble. I didn't become the bitter man I was so afraid I might. I became something else. I became me again. It started with small things. I found a little diner near my apartment. Nothing special, just a counter, 5 booths, and a waitress named Carla who called everyone Han. I started going there every Friday, sitting by the window with a book and letting the bustle of life hum around me. Nobody there knew who I had been. Nobody expected anything from me. I could just exist. I also started writing again. Not about Ray, not about heartbreak, just thoughts, images, pieces of myself I'd buried under years of compromise. I kept a journal just for me. Some pages were messy, some were blank, but each entry felt like a piece of skin regrowing after a long, silent wound. And then one rainy evening, not unlike the morning Owen had appeared, something unexpected happened. I ran into him again. Owen. He was sitting outside a bookstore, reading under a tiny awning, the rain misting around him. When he looked up and saw me, he smiled, a tired, knowing kind of smile. "You made it out," he said. "I did," I replied. We ended up talking for an hour. Nothing heavy, just life. He'd started volunteering at a shelter. Said it helped him feel like he was building something real. I told him about the journal, the diner, the silence. It was the most I'd spoken about myself in years without hesitation, without editing. When we said goodbye, he clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Don't let her rewrite your story," he said. "And I won't. Because here's the thing. Ray will always tell her version. She'll always spin her side. To some people, I'll always be the clingy husband, the controlling partner, the one who held her back. Let them believe it. Because the people who truly see you, they don't need an explanation. They just know." A few weeks ago, I returned to that beach we visited once on a weekend trip during our 2nd year of marriage. Back then, Ray hated it. Said it was too quiet, too gray, too plain. I remember feeling disappointed at the time, thinking I'd made a bad choice. This time, I stood on that same sand, the wind in my face, the waves folding over themselves like pages turning. And it was beautiful. Not because anything had changed, but because I finally had. I didn't need noise anymore. I didn't need approval. I didn't need someone to see me to know I mattered. I stood alone. But I wasn't lonely. And in that silence, I found peace. Not the kind you chase, not the kind you earn, but the kind that comes when you stop clinging to people who were never meant to stay. So, if you're reading this, if you've been where I've been, let me say this to you. You are not weak for staying too long. You are not broken for loving someone who couldn't love you back. And you are not invisible. Not anymore. Because the quiet that once felt like punishment, Now it feels like home, and I'm finally free.